what is the cause of diabetes? Anybody want any water? I can't hand it out, so you have to go get it. I'm sorry.
I didn't want to walk.
No, you could. You could. Anybody else just come up and help yourself, please? Bear with me because I think this is probably the first time that I have spoken publicly, even though, you know, it's a small group. This is the first time I've spoken publicly in probably 11 years. So the stamina that I once had in terms of talking without becoming thirsty or dry or anything like that, it's been quite a while. So I'll take frequent little water breaks. All right, moving on. Underlying factors: diet, genetic predisposition, obesity, sedentary lifestyle, and spiritual mental component. I will get into that. Anyone who's dealing with type 2 diabetes, they've done enough investigation to determine that the majority of the reasons why we're having type 2 or such a type 2 diabetes pandemic is because of diet. They tell us that there is a genetic predisposition, but the amount of people who actually contract diabetes because of predisposition is anywhere between top 10 and 5%. Predisposition, in my point, is overrated. Basically, what ended up happening is that through the genetic process, when you're born, we receive genes from our mother, genes from our father, and those genes become compiled and, of course, they produce us. Some of the genes that we get are good, some of the genes that we get are bad. However, they're still functional. There is always, when we have those bad genes in us, we're susceptible to, you know, different things, viruses, illnesses, and stuff like that. However, they work perfectly fine until there's a trigger. Just like it's the difference between having an unloaded gun and a loaded gun. You know, an unloaded gun is not a dangerous weapon, but once you put a bullet in the gun and aim it at somebody, now it becomes a dangerous weapon. So that's what predisposition, genetic predisposition basically is that we have the genes in our body that would, if we put it in that particular environment, it would set off or trigger that mechanism that gives us the disease. But as long as we do not introduce ourselves to that trigger, then the gene is fine. Diet and high in refined carbohydrates such as white sugar, white flour, high amounts of cooked animal saturated fats and proteins, trans fatty acids produced from cooking, especially frying foods and oils at high temperatures. Low in fiber, coffee and caffeinated beverages, smoking, and a life devoid of love and exercise. High in stress and watching TV programming, aka the standard American diet, has an overwhelming effect on the development of diabetes. In the holistic field, we always have a joke about the standard American diet. And as you see, the acronym called it SAD. And, you know, to be quite frank, the foods that they produce and request for us to eat as nutrition, you know, it's sad. It really is. It's loaded with all types of chemicals. It's overprocessed. Anything that you can imagine that the process that goes through foods and things that we eat, anything that you can imagine that's completely unorthodox to the way that we really should be eating is in the standard American diet. And one of the things that I have been committed to doing is educating as many people as I possibly can about nutrition and how important it is. You know, it's extremely important for us to be able to nourish our body so that we can maintain efficient optimal health. And one of the this is the culprit, right? This is one of the culprits right here, sugar. Sugar is high on the list. High on this list, the high consumption of refined sugar. In this book, this gentleman here wrote this book back in the 70s. He did a complete study of sugar consumption throughout the world. Sugar alone is a subject that I can probably do maybe a 2-3 hour lecture more, because white sugar is because of the prominence and because of the effect that it has on us. You'll be surprised. In this book, there's a quote from a natural healer, Japanese healer. His name was George Sawa. He's since deceased, but he had written this quote in the book that Western medicine and science have only just begun to sound the alarm signals over the fantastic decrease in his per capita sugar consumption in the United States. Their researches and warnings are, I fear, many decades too late. So he wrote this in the 70s, and he was already making it known that because of the amount of sugar consumption, the white sugar consumption that was prevalent in this country and throughout the world, that even the efforts to let people know how dangerous white sugar was, or still is, that it's already too late. He goes on to say, I'm confident that Western medicine will one day admit that what has been known in the Orient or Asia for years, sugar is without question the #1 murder in the history of humanity, much more lethal than opium or radioactive fallout.
Opium? Heroin?
It's crazy. Foolish people who give or sell Canada babies will one day discover to their horror that they have much to answer for. It's saying, I mean, it's not fit for adults to consume. And it's even less fit for us to feed it to our children. In the so-called dark ages of Europe, natural healers were often cautioning people about the risk of eating refined sugar because the many illnesses that it caused, especially the newly identified disease called diabetes mellitus. Today, much to my surprise, and this is me talking, some doctors are not making claims that refined sugar does not contribute to the development of diabetes. The following statement is from the online journal Medical News, and this was published on December 27, 2006. This is what they had to say. It has long been suspected that a high sugar diet over a long period of time may lead to an increased risk of developing diabetes, but there has been little or no evidence to support this idea. So I'm like, wait a minute, there's no evidence to support this argument? However, raw statistics prove that During World War I in the U.S., the outbreak of diabetes dropped sharply because the citizens of the country, dropped sharply among the citizens of the country. The common factor was the sugar was rationed out. So during World War I, because of the era of depression and all the issues that the country was going through at that time, any of us who have relatives who we were able to blessedly to speak with during that time, or the early 1900s, they would frequently say to us that was a hard time, and they had to go to local areas where food and things were rationed out. Well, one of the items of food that was rationed out was sugar. And during that process, because the sugar was not as prevalent in the community as it was prior to World War I, the diabetes rate fell off. Now, check this out. Furthermore, during World War I and World War II, diabetes grew among the soldiers because the soldiers had no limitations or rations to contend with. So, diabetes dropped amongst the people in the country against the citizens, but in the military, it increased. So what do they say? has been long suspected that a high sugar diet over a long-term period may lead to an increased risk of developing diabetes, but there has been little or no evidence to support that idea. What do y'all think? I think differently. And today, the trend continues. About 100 years ago, Americans ate about 1 pound of sugar per person. Now it's estimated that Americans gorge on an astounding 165 pounds of sugar per person per year. Wow. And naturally, as the sugar consumption rises, so does the diabetes rate. Look, it's 1958. This is 1994. It's already off the chart. We haven't gotten up here to 2011. I mean, this is old data. I was trying to find as much data as I possibly could to support my argument. You know, this is the earliest graph that I can find. But in 1994, it was already off the chart. And we weren't even consuming as much sugar then as we are now. Why am I making this argument? Because refined sugar is in everything. I mean everything that is a staple to our diet. Soft drinks, fruit drinks, flavored waters, beer, wine, alcohol, ice cream, peanut butter, bread, yogurt, ketchup. It's an interesting story about ketchup. You know there's a difference between ketchup as K-A-T-S-U-P and K-E-T-C-H-U-P. The FDA made a claim that you cannot call ketchup ketchup unless it has sugar in it. So if you see C-A-T-S-U-P, and I didn't put it on the board because I'm used to the K-E-T, it just sounds right. I mean, cats and ketchup, you know. But the FDA said that you cannot call ketchup K-A-T-S-U-P unless you put sugar in it. Bacon, ketchup and sugar's in bacon. Baby food, cakes, rolls, processed meats, canned soups, cough drops, baked beans, pickles, soy sauce, soy milk, English muffins, Ritz crackers, hot dogs, breakfast cereals, frozen breakfast foods, canned vegetables, boxed cereals, candy, canned fruits, chewing gum, cough syrup, cigarettes, and the list goes on. I mean, I don't have enough time to sit up here and list how much sugar is in the foods that we eat. So whoever thought that sugar would be in cigarettes? It's true. Let me go back here. Let me stay on sugar for just a minute. White sugar, as I said, is one of the most detrimental foods that we can possibly eat. White sugar acts just like a drug. Biochemists know this. So in order for them, if you own a company and you're fixing your food or you're preparing your food, you have to find a way to get people to eat your food. So the food companies hire on biochemists. Biochemists' responsibility are to find different methods or different ingredients to be able to mix together to put in the food so that people can eat it. How many remember back in the day when the saying would go that don't eat Chinese food because an hour later you'll be hungry? Y'all remember that? Well, in the Chinese food, they found an ingredient. There was an ingredient called MSG, and if you go to these areas now, they'll tell you in their menus no MSG. Well, MSG, what is monosodium glutamate, is a toxic neurotoxin. And when you eat the food, when you eat anything with MSG in it, it goes through a chemical process that fires off neurons in your brain. And those neurons are firing off so rapidly, they're expiring their life cycle much more quickly than what it would normally take place. So when you're eating food, the body gets stimulated by this MSG because the neurons, the neurological cells are firing off so quickly and it's dying. So you're going through a process that after you eat it, you want more. That's the same effect that sugar has on the body. That's the reason why diabetics are so hungry? Because they're even though they're eating food, they're not being nourished because the food that they're eating is either being processed too quickly because it's stimulating the digestive system and stimulating cells, or they're just not getting any nutrition. So, as I said, you eat Chinese food, and an hour later you're hungry again. That's the reason why. Obesity has also been linked to diabetes. It's also been linked to cancer, hypertension, non-insulin dependent diabetes, mellitus, arteriosclerosis, heart failure, stroke, renal failure, and gallbladder disease. What's so interesting about that? What's so interesting about, what's so interesting about that is that everything that you see here in this cycle is the same thing that diabetics